Hi everybody, welcome back. This is part 12 of our Lancaster build. This is the Border 132 scale kit, and in this episode I'm going to finish off the gun turrets. We've got the front and rear turrets to build. Already done the mid-upper earlier on in the series. Okay, so let's get some assembly done. That's going to be the main part of the video really, because painting on these turrets is fairly straightforward. They're mainly black on the inside, but on our aircraft some parts like these frames were an aluminium colour, so we'll just pick that out just for a bit of contrast really. One thing with these parts is just to make sure that they're all aligned, even though the location pins are square here. There's a little bit of play in them, and it's easy if you're not careful just to get things out of line. The part that I've just fitted here is one of the gunner's control handles. There's one on either side, and these were used to act as both triggers for the guns and also to control the elevation of the two guns in this case. The traverse of the turret was done by some pedals down underneath the gunner's feet. These are the jacks which elevated the gun carriage. The fit on these side pieces, these mountings, is a little bit sloppy, so it's easy to get them slightly misaligned one side to the other. So just need to concentrate on that a little bit. Just going to leave that to dry before I do any more work on it. The more parts I'm adding to it, you can just easily twist the thing back out of shape again, so just leave it alone. Come back when it's dried up. Whilst we're waiting for the carriage to set up, we'll just put the guns together. These are actually master barrels. You do get brass barrels in the kit, but the master ones are slightly better, I think. Might as well make up the 4 rear guns as well. The plastic barrels in the kit are solid, so they're really not up to the standard of the rest of the kit. These are drilled out to 1.2 millimeters to get the brass barrel to fit. You don't want to be drilling too small a hole and forcing the brass in, because it'll just split the plastic. but there's not a lot of width to play with on the breech, so you just need to be careful with those. Make sure the barrel's straight. Okay, just spend a bit of time getting those guns nice and parallel and all orientated properly. They will show up like a sore thumb if you don't do that once you get them in the turret. The instructions tell us to fit these parts, which are the mountings really, I suppose, and these fit into the cradles, but the instructions tell us to fit these to the guns first, and I found when I was building the mid-upper that it was very difficult to get these in with the guns attached to them. So I seem to remember, it's a while since I built the mid-upper, but I seem to remember doing it this way, and it was slightly easier. I say slightly, it's still quite a fiddly operation to get these in. Now I want these with a slight droop. It's fairly characteristic of Lancasters on the ground that the nose guns did tilt down slightly, so that's where we're going to be with them. This is the seat, it's just a sling really. These are the ammunition feeds. A lot of the parts on this assembly are quite flimsy, but actually when you get them together they support each other. So these very fragile little frames at the side, once you get them attached to the hoop over the top of the turret, everything stiffens up. So you've just got to be careful with the assembly until everything's located, and get stronger as you go along. These are the ammunition boxes that I built earlier. They just fit underneath onto the bottom plate. The drawing in the instructions is a little bit confusing, but the correct way around is with the brackets on the outside. The last thing to do is to fit the gun sights. Now we do get a clear part to represent the sight in the kit. It's not the most precise fit really, but you just need to be careful until the glue dries. So that's the lower part of the turret finished. Quite fiddly, but the detail on it's incredible. When we get some detail painting on that done, it should look really nice. We've got the glazing obviously, and I'll paint the actual glazing part of the turret separately and then just hopefully be able to drop it on later. It just needs gluing carefully onto the back plate. So we'll just put that to one side whilst we move on to the rear turret. Now, Border give us an option here of two styles of rear turrets. There's the FN20, which is this early one, and this late FN120. That incorporated a few changes from the earlier style, with a sliding window at the side, dispensed with some of the armour plate in the turret. And unusually, our aircraft, even though it was an early Lancaster, was retrofitted with an FM120 in 1944. So this is the one that we're going to be building. So again, I'll spend some time, cut the parts out, and then we'll come back and do some assembly on this one. I think the best way to approach this is to try and build everything up from the base plate, which is this. We're told to cut the bottom 8 bullets off these ammunition belts. Counting 8's not that easy. I've got my visor on at the minute. Goodness me, they're fiddly. They won't go in straight off the sprue. You've got to modify them a little bit, the fitting at the top. So just trim them until you can get them to go in, but otherwise they're a very difficult fit. Now, it wouldn't be the end of the world, I don't think, if you gave up on these. They're going to be very difficult to see under the turret, but it's nice to have them there. I'll just leave that to dry for a while. We need to trap the sight frame in the mounting at this point. Just put the frame in. I'm not going to put the actual sight in place just now. I'm just easing the hole at the bottom of the side plate here because it's a very tight fit. You don't want to be forcing these parts, they will snap. So you want a nice easy connection. A few things to line up at this point in the assembly. Coming onto the base plate, and this is the main control column really for the gunner. Right, see if we can get the two assemblies together. And the instructions tell us to modify these two side parts. We've got to cut some of it away. These side panels, as well as holding all the guns, they form the ejector chutes for the spent cartridges, which came out of the bottom of the turret. Again, we just need to trim this little tab at the bottom just to get a neat fit. Just that little bit of work goes a long way to improving that. I'm going to leave the base of the turret off because it's going to be difficult to get paint in there, so we'll come back to that. Again, the hole here in the bottom of the turret plate's too tight, so I just need to open that out just a fraction, and it's a symptom really of the moulding on the kit, which isn't quite as good as the original design. And what that means is that some of the pins are too big or the holes are too small, and it just complicates the assembly a little bit. It's such a shame that Wingnut Wings didn't manage to go on to produce this kit. They would have made a much better job of the moulding, I think, and presumably they would have ironed out some of these fit issues. If you build any other Wingnut Wings kit, you don't get these fit issues. These guns are made in just the same way as on the front turret. Just try and get the guns into the carriage. Now the guns are designed to elevate, but the fit's not great, so I want to glue them into position. Obviously, if you are gluing them fixed, you need to just check that the guns are parallel, pointing in the right direction. And with everything else done, can just drop the sight in. There we go, both of our turrets. So the next job is just to give these a coat of Mr. Surfacer 1500 black. And before that, I just want to give the brass parts a coat of etching primer. That's because these are quite vulnerable once they're on the model, and they will chip, the paint will chip off if you don't put etching primer on. So that's first, then the Mr. Surfacer black, and then we can do a little bit of detail painting and dry brushing on these just to bring that detail out. I'm just going to prep some of the parts for the rear turret here, and this is the original sprue in the border kit. and the early kits, which this is, had a reputation for pretty poor clear parts, and what the importers have done is commission a new sprue which replaces the worst of the clears in the original boxing. So that's what I'm going to be using here, and the difference is pretty plain when you put the two next to each other. You're not going to be able to pick it up on the camera, but believe me, the new sprues are much better than the originals. They don't contain all the parts, it just corrects the worst of them. Now fortunately the parts that I need for my turret are included on this. The modern boxings of course have the replacement sprue in, I think in addition to the originals as well. I'm not sure about that, but I think that's the case, and certainly the Dambuster boxing that came out last year I think has got the new sprue in it. So you shouldn't have any problem with your clear parts if you've got the more recent editions of the kit. A Lancaster is one of those aircraft where the transparencies are fairly prominent, so it's nice to have them nicely finished off. What I like to do with clear parts is get them masked up as soon as I bring them off the sprue. That's so that they don't get marked. The mask is from ASK and it's code 32054, and it's really pretty important to have a mask set, I think, for a Lancaster in any scale really, because there's an awful lot of work to do, there's a lot of glazing, and these are a big time saver. Just a quick test fit, and happily they go together really nicely. Now the method I'm going to use to finish these clear parts is to paint them all separately. I'll mask them all up, paint them, and then assemble them, and I can then do any touch-ups that I need to do once everything's together. The reason for doing it that way is to make sure that all the interiors are nice and clean. It's sometimes the case that you can assemble all these parts, which effectively seals the turret, and then when you remove the masking after painting you find that there's specks of dust inside. This way you can avoid that. So hopefully it'll work. Sometimes this panel on the front of the turret was removed, and the kit offers that option. You can see on this alternative part, and I think that was done to improve visibility for the gunner, but at the expense obviously of a freezing cold turret. This is the nose turret glazing, which is one part, as you can see. It just needs joining with the back section, which I've pre-painted because there are some little brackets around the side which you can't get into to paint black afterwards. So just paint the interior, that's all we need to do, and so we can just very carefully join it with some extra thin cement. Just need to tack it in one or two places. So we'll just leave that to dry for a while, and in the meantime we'll come back and do some painting on the turrets just to bring a bit of detail out. Okay, so these assemblies have had a coat of NATO black. I prefer that to pure black on assemblies like this. It just looks a bit more in scale really. And now I'm going to do some dry brushing with some German grey. This hopefully should just pop the detail out a little bit. Just take it easy with this step because it's quite easy to break these parts. The plastic in this kit's pretty delicate. I'll be using the NATO black on the airframe when I come to paint it. It's a decent representation, I think, for RAF Special Night, which is obviously the underside colour on the Lancaster. This is a good step to do really, because looking into the turrets through very shiny transparencies, it's easy to just lose the detail when it's all black. Now my references show that this aircraft had aluminium coloured framing on the nose turret, so we'll pick that out next. So we'll use some Tamiya gloss aluminium for this. It's a really nice paint to use for brush painting. We get some photo etch belts in the kit. These have been annealed, by the way, so they will hopefully bend and hold the shape. Get some primer on these, then we can paint them and fit them to the turrets. Okay, they're all done. Just remember to take the masking off for the gun sights. I'll get some photos of these for the end of the video. It's going to be difficult to see the interior once the glazing's on. Okay, we'll get the glazing on this rear turret now, and I've found in test fitting that I had a bit of a problematic fit of one side of these side panels. The other one goes on okay, but this one was a bit short at the top, left a gap at the top. So to sort that out, what I've done is I've removed the tabs at the bottom here, and that allows just a little bit of movement up and down just to close that gap up a little bit. I've also sanded the edge very carefully of the main top of the canopy part of the transparency, if you like, and just got a snugger fit of that with the gun carriage. And between them, those two things enable us just to close that up. So we'll give this a final polish just to make sure we haven't got any dust or scraps of paint on the inside. Once this is closed up, you won't have another chance. And one thing just to point out with this piece of the transparency is that there's an internal frame which I've picked out with a brush very carefully. You could mask it, I suppose, but I decided not to. Just did some careful brush work just to fill in the black internal frame. I'm just cleaning that up a little bit now. This is a last finish with some of this, which is Tamiya modelling wax. Just use some Tamiya extra thin quick setting, just very carefully. And now that the glue's flashed off, I'll just put a little bit of tape on just to hold that in place. You don't want to be putting the tape on first and then applying the glue, because it will just wick under the tape and ruin the transparency. So just make sure it has flashed off properly. Again, this tab at the bottom is just interfering with lining this up precisely, so I'm just going to shave that off. Just be very careful with this. Obviously, if you slip shaving this off, you're going to ruin the transparency, and if you put too much force on it, you'll crack it, so it's fraught with danger really. Now here at this point you realise that there's very little of the interior detail visible. It's up to you how much effort you put onto the interior of these turrets. Certainly the detail painting gets a bit lost. The only thing that I would recommend is that you did the ammunition belts. They're quite visible, and a bit of dry brushing on the front detail helps as well, but apart from that you don't really need to go overboard with these. That's ready to go on the model now. This is the nose turret, and this is just the two-part glazing that I showed you earlier on. Well, the glazing and the back plate. Now I just need to talk a little bit more about this turret and the assembly sequence, because I've not built the model in the same way that BIII would have you do it. BIII tell us to fit the nose turret as you join the fuselage halves, but I thought that that was far too risky in terms of preserving the turret over the rest of the build. So I went ahead and joined the fuselage halves, but the problem with that is that you can't just drop the nose turret in. Now the issue with building the kit in the way I have, so I've joined the fuselage halves, is that the moulding of the fuselage half comes with this fairing moulded into it, which goes there. Now this is a part that usually on Lancaster kits comes separately, and you just drop it in over the top of the turret once it's in place. But because BIII have moulded this, or Wingnut Wings originally moulded this fairing integral, it's not possible to squeeze the nose turret in. So what I've done is sawed these off with a razor saw, and that enables you to just fit the nose turret into place, and then we will attach the fairings as you would in most other Lancaster kits. Just do a little bit of filling and paint them, and then we're all good. Now the issue as well is that you can't do it even the way that I've gone about it if you've got the ammunition boxes in place. It just doesn't leave you enough leverage to get the turret down. So I've removed them, and I'll refit them from inside the nose blister once it's all in securely. So it's a major deviation from the BIII instructions, but for me it's a more straightforward way of dealing with the assembly, so as not to damage what's a fairly delicate part of the model with the nose guns sticking out like that. So it can go in at this point. So to get that in, I just want to paint this surrounding area, the turret opening, with some of the NATO black, and then we can do the rest of the assembly, refit the fairings, and we're good to go. It's actually quite a simple job just to drop the ammo boxes in from below. There's plenty of space in there before you've put this nose blister in. So overall, if I was building the model again, this is the way that I would do it, by fitting the turret later on in the build. Okay, now the fairings can go back in. Providing you're neat with the way that you cut this out, you shouldn't have too much filling to do. Just a swipe of Mr. Surfacer in there, and you'll never know that that's been cut off. This is just a bit of lacquer thinners. Obviously be careful next to the glazing if you're doing this. And that's just wiping off the excess Mr. Surfacer that I've used to fill that gap with the fairing. Okay, so we need to do a little bit more filling work around some of these joins, but I'll do that when I come to do the top camouflage scheme, the green and dark earth, which extends onto this section. But the main thing is that the turret's in, the glazing's nice and crisp, and that's a good step to get over. We'll just have a look at the fitting of the rear turret. So for the rear turret we just have this extension which just finishes off the rear of the fuselage. So that's fairly straightforward. We do have a glazing or a transparent piece to fit in here. That's for the tail lights, which is a nice little feature. It doesn't fit very well, unfortunately, so you just need to cut the pin off the bottom and then it just clips in. So I'll just dry assemble this for the moment because I want to do some painting and mask off those tail lights. But basically the turret just drops in like that, and this tongue just goes into a nice slot in the back of the fuselage. The mid-upper, which I built some time ago, is this. Now I've taken the glazing off because I'll need to repaint it in the camouflage colours. This was originally done in black, but basically when we're ready, towards the end of the build probably, we'll just drop that in like that, and that finishes the 3 turrets off. Okay, so I've done for this episode. We've got the turrets out of the way, which is quite a big step. They're actually quite a tricky part of the build. The way that they go together, the fit is a bit suspect in some areas, so you've got to have your wits about you and do plenty of dry fitting, plenty of modification to the parts to get them to fit properly. But eventually, if you do take care, they'll go together okay, as you can see. So that brings the build on quite a bit. I'm glad to have got those out of the way, and particularly the nose turret fitted after my slightly risky move not fitting it earlier on in the build. But all's well that ends well, and in the next episode I'm going to finish off the glazing, the cockpit canopy, obviously the nose blister and some of the other window glazing to finish off, and then we'll be ready for some painting on the fuselage. So I'll do a bit of work on that next week, and hopefully you'll join me for the next part 13. Hope that's not an omen, and I'll see you next time, everybody. Look after yourselves. Bye for now.